The other thing as well, just to go back to this thing of not fighting,
Yes.
is this sort of sense in which, apart from many of us believing that the actual fight is really here,
Most
at the same time, it is, why would one fight for people who, quite rightly, you sense, don't even care about Britain?
Well, this is the point.
This blob you talk about.
As I say, there's been a number of policies, projects across my lifetime that have completely, utterly ruined this country, as far as I'm concerned. Principal among them being mass immigration and the demographic consequences that has and will have going into the future, with the British being projected as a minority in Britain in a matter of decades, which is an incredibly bleak and depressing and crushing prospect. Which is to say nothing of, for example, the climate policies, net zero, which has deindustrialized this country and made energy, which is the fundamental ingredient to a prosperous society, unaffordable. It's massively increased the price of that. And just on the deindustrialization, I mean, that's been something that, as far as I'm concerned, has been in progress since Thatcher. Thatcher is held up as this kind of conservative hero. And certainly some of her solutions were appropriate for the time that she existed in. But the idea that what we need today is essentially reheated, lukewarm Thatcherism is just totally misguided as far as I'm concerned. Because what has Thatcherism, the project of neoliberal economics, done to this country? Well, it's left northern towns, completely without industry and without economic prosperity. Because I don't know if you've been to Northern England recently.
Yes.
I was in Sheffield late last year. It's not somewhere that I've spent a huge amount of time because I grew up in the south and I've spent most of my life in the south, but I've spent some time in the north. And you go to some of these towns and it's just graffiti and litter and, strangers from, hither and yon, from all corners of the earth walking the streets. And you go there and it's like, what, is this good? Is this the outcome that the people who, implemented these policies wanted? I'm prepared to say probably not. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But it's an incredibly bleak place, Britain, now. And that's what's so depressing. And so on the question of conscription, just to bring it back to this topic, the idea that someone like, someone my age, 23-year-old fighting age male, would be sent to somewhere like Ukraine on behalf of the political class that has done that to this country, and that I should be, there should be no question that I do that, is absurd. And so it's no surprise that so many young people would not take up arms for Britain, because 41% of under 30s, even if Britain were to be invaded, wouldn't take up arms for the country. And it's no surprise that that's the case, because if you look at the prospects offered to us right now, housing is unaffordable, energy is extremely expensive, mass migration is tearing the fabric of the country apart, the British are set to be a minority here within decades, and any semblance of culture that still exists here is just entirely subverted. Where Britishness is allowed to express itself, it's tamped down and it's something that's framed as being shameful or wrong or evil or whatever. And then the culture that is allowed to exist is essentially very, very thin American music or films or television or whatever else, whose morals, the moral kind of, the moral paradigm that it pushes, the moral system and the set of morals that it seeks to deliver to the audience are just fundamentally wrong, in my opinion.
Can I just put one case to you on this point of why, which obviously is undeniable. Most young people wouldn't fight for the country, and that is this: is that essentially you're talking about they can't buy houses, the country's been destroyed by mass immigration, etc. But most young people, I mean, we're talking about mythical young people. You know what I mean? Most young people, tend to agree with mass migration. And I would suggest to you that the reason they wouldn't fight for the country is actually much more to do with the fact that they think we're a terrible country. Not that we are a bleak country, but they think we are a terrible, racist, imperialist country. That's why they wouldn't fight.
That's a very, very good point. I'm glad you've brought that up, because I don't necessarily disagree with you. But what I would say is that we are, all of us, a product of our time and place. And there is this idea, which I regard as being one of these kind of post-war liberal myths, that young people are naturally, young people are both naturally and duty-bound to be the most radical or rebellious element of any society. And whilst I think that there is a contingent of young people for whom that's true, I think it's a vanishingly small minority, because I think for the most part, young people are the most conformist element of any society. And why wouldn't that be the case? Because they don't, because young people, being young people, lacking life experience, don't really know any better than what authority has told them for their entire lives. And as I was saying before, when it comes to the schools, the education system, mass media, and all the rest of it, what we've been told is that Britain is an evil, racist country, and that to be good is to be liberal and to be progressive, and what in the vernacular is now called woke. And so, on the one hand, yes, I do think that I think your point is right. That the primary reason that most young people wouldn't go to war for Britain is because they think Britain is evil. But I would say to that, well, actually, those young people are the victim of a system that has not had their best interests at heart and has essentially indoctrinated them into believing that. And so, our ruling class shouldn't be surprised when those same young people refuse to take up arms.
No, I agree. I mean, also, I would just add, just for context, as everyone says these days, this is a process that has been going on for a long time. Oh, yeah. Charlie, I think you say you were born in 2001, was it? Yeah. Trust me, going back to the 1970s, it basically arrived in the 60s, broadly speaking. 1970s, same thing, some 80s. Essentially, the whole. It was somehow, it wasn't just simply being self-critical in a kind of healthy way. It was complete self-annihilation all the way along, and we're obviously, as you say, we are, reaping, unfortunately, the rewards of that. One thing that does interest me, you said there, that your parents took you to places, as indeed did mine, places of interest on a Sunday afternoon, things like that.
Indeed, yes.
And they had a very strong sense of what they were, and they certainly weren't kind of right-wing particularly. But you see, that might be the case for a lot of people, but how come in your case it crystallized into a very strong political viewpoint?
Do you know what, Peter? That's a really good question. I don't know if I actually know the answer to it.
It might not be an answer.
Yeah, I wonder if it might be a temperamental thing. I actually think, bizarrely enough, and this is a crucial element of all of this, the conversation about young people, but the COVID-19 pandemic was a period where I was at university. And I was living at university for most of the lockdowns. And so I was kind of just in this house by myself, doing my studies, but in my free time.
What was that, a university?
Yeah, that's right.
What did you do at university?
I did politics at university, surprise. But I was, in my free time, I was reading, I was listening to podcasts, I was, making sure I was still physically fit. But really, I was quite solitary. I wasn't really spending any time or socializing with anybody.
Yeah.
But to be frank with you, I really enjoyed it. And I know that may sound a little bit insensitive, because the lockdowns were a hugely negative experience for the majority of young people, especially given what it took away from them. The experience of socializing with peers and understanding what it means to be an adult in the wider world, transitioning from school to post school. But in that time, it was really then that I started to become properly politically aware. And it was in that time that I came to realize that almost everything I'd been taught for my entire life had been total nonsense. And it was then that these life experiences that I'd had, which previously have not had a political character, like the things I said about before, like the experience of just growing up in England, it took on a political character for me, because what I realized was these are unique experiences particular to a very specific time and place, and a product of a very particular people. And that's the crucial thing, is the people part of it, because these things don't come from nowhere. They are a product of thousands of years of tradition, of culture. And so it was that really, the uniqueness of Britishness and of British culture and of Britain as a country and as a land, that really made me, I don't know, it made me realize that this is a place that's deeply special and deeply beautiful and worth preserving.